are not smart enough to understand.
Let's get started on this lecture here. So if you have seen me give other lectures recently, a part of this might be slightly redundant, but I think it's just important to get that there. So I'll do what are the two questions you ask, and then we'll answer those questions and come up with some examples. So, as I've been saying at this camp, pretty much if you're deciding how do I give this speech better, there are two questions to be asking. They are, what is the end game of the speech? What's the strategic goal? What are you trying to get out of it? And the second question is, what are the unique characteristics or traits of this speech? And by characteristics or traits, what I mean is every speech will have a different set of, based on how long it is, where it is in the course of the round, based on all of these different things, will have different advantages and disadvantages associated with it. The PMC, for example, has 20 minutes of guaranteed prep. The MG is probably going to be really time crunched because it's your only chance to answer any disads, and if you drop something, you're screwed. No new arguments. So those are just types of the examples that I'm talking about in that. So I think the MO is kind of the speech in which its place within the round has maybe the most effect, and where considering how the argument or how the speech functions in the course of a normal debate round can be pretty important and can guide you strategically in the choices that you're trying to make. So we'll answer that second question first. What are some of the unique characteristics of the MO? Klaus.
It's the first speech you can kick out of positions in.
That's a big thing, right? That the MG, they have to answer everything. They have to answer all of the LO arguments that came out. The MO doesn't. The MO, you can say, okay, I'm going to kick this disad, extend their no link, focus all of it on the other time. Maybe you were running a conditional counterplan that you can say, you know what, hey, kick the counterplan, we're just going to do the case stuff. So it very, very, very much is the, in some instances, you might have an option to say, well, we're going to ignore the case because we're going to do a counterplan that tries to solve all of it. And there might be a way to do it. But for the most part, the MO just gets to figure out, or to decide which issues they do and which issues they don't want to talk about and focus their time on those. So I think probably the most important skill for an MO to have is the decision-making strategically. An MG needs to be technically proficient. You're not going to win rounds if you have an MG who can't do the line by line. That line by line is still an obviously valuable, important skill in the MO. It can be very necessary. It's not necessarily a deal breaker. If you're maybe a little less proficient there, it's not something that automatically means you lose the round, as long as you possess the skill to pick which arguments are the strategic and good ones to go for. Can anybody else think of a unique characteristic?
Get the block.
You get the block in the sense that, so the MG has 8 minutes. It's incredibly time crunched. There are then 12 straight minutes of the negative talking, right? So you get not only are you getting to pick the arguments that you want to talk about, but you are also getting the, not only are you doing that, but you're getting an incredible amount of time to focus on those arguments. When you consider that after that 12 minutes of speaking, there's only going to be 5 minutes more talking by the PMR. So that's not only do you get to pick and choose, but you also you will be spending more time talking about the issues, if you're doing it right, than the other team will, because you have just structurally, there is more time afforded to you at this spot than they have. Can anyone think of another one?
Summarizing down, like focusing really what you're winning on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one really important thing about the MO is that it's the first speech in which you know what all of everyone's arguments are. There aren't new arguments coming after you for the most part. It's all of those arguments are going to be in play. So it's not, at that point it becomes not, giving yourselves access to arguments later on. It's not allowing you to make arguments later, giving you flexibility or something. Not a question you're worried about. You know what the arguments are. So the only thing you need to do then is say why the arguments you're winning are better than the arguments they're winning. So not only does the MO need to have the strategic sense to be able to pick those arguments, but the technical skill necessary for comparative analysis of, hey, this is their warrant, this is our warrant is better because. Those are the two things that the MO really needs to do. So when you think about it, this shows why the MO can be a pretty powerful speech. The MO basically, more than any, we've kind of talked about this but haven't said it explicitly. The MO, more than any other speech in the debate, decides what the decision is going to be about. The PMR can too, but if you're doing your job, you're probably trying to stick the PMR. They've got to be, you're painting them into a spot where they're going to have to win. You're deciding what they have to win in order to do that. They aren't. By your choice of which arguments you're going for, whether you're kicking out of the politics disad or the econ disad, you're picking what the debate's going to be about. Whether you decide to kick the counter plan or stay with it, you're picking what the decision making. At the end of the day, what the judge's decision is based on, you are deciding that. So let's think about this for a second. Not only are you A, deciding what the debate's going to be about, and B, able to spend more time on it than the other team, but C, already know all of the other team's arguments and be able, so you have all of the time necessary. You're not preempting against anything that might be coming. You know all of their arguments. They are there. They've been made for you. And that's why I think, to be honest, I think this is in some ways a disadvantage of the structure of Parley because of how valuable a good MO can be. I think more than any other speech, you get to decide what the debate's about and spend more time on it and why you're winning it. No other speech gets to do that. So the MO often, I think, isn't as valuable. People don't use it to its full effect. But when you do use it to a full effect, I think it is a good MO can be just an absolutely devastating round winner. If you're good at one speech as a team, I would pick being good at the MO because it makes the opposition, it makes the a bad LO, even if you're going into a round where you don't like your strategy, you think you dropped some stuff, you've probably at least given yourself a couple, 2 or 3 options in the MO going into that the MO can pick and choose from. Even if you don't feel great about any of them, you still get to pick the best of the 3. You still get to say, all right, well, I'm going to make the debate about the one I feel the best about, and I've got more time to spend on it. So even if it's an argument I don't like, even if I think their argument is probably more true, I'm still going to have all of that time to spend on it, and in so doing, I can cover up a lot of my other potential deficiencies. Is like, I can just talk about why this is important for a while. And it doesn't matter if I screw up a lot of different other things, if we don't speak very pretty, if we're not fast, if we're not... As long as we spend more time talking about what the debate is about, you have a good chance of winning. It seems intuitive, but that's what the MO does for you, is gives you that ability. So, as we've been doing this, I feel like we've kind of answered that first question too, of what is the end game strategic goal? The end game strategic goal is picking your strategy and winning that strategy. It is the strategic decision making and the comparative analysis. Those are the 2 things that an MO really needs. So I think that the next question that is asked after that is obviously, how do we do those things? How do we create and make it more likely that we're going to be able to pick the right argument to go for and pick the how to do that effectively? So let's answer that first question. How do we pick the arguments we want to go for? And how do we get good at picking those correct arguments?
Nick Griffin, in one round where I had with him, like, the one thing that you want to do with the disad is you'll have multiple shells in your shell, so you should be extending the parts to get you at least a part of that shell coming out of the MO so that you get some access to your offense.
Meaning exactly what?
Like, say that you have like a uniqueness scenario, and you have a couple different uniqueness points, you have a couple different link arguments, a couple different internal links, and then you have multiple different impacts. You'll be extending the uniqueness that gets you whatever link you need, which will get you a specific internal link that will get you to a specific impact. It's probably you just want to kind of parametricize down to what you want in the disad. You don't need to go for everything. So you're basically, within your disad, there are multiple disads that you can go for, and you basically just extend the parts that you want for that one part.
Yeah. So it's like, I think we were talking about with the construction of DAs. So, like you were saying, you have like multiple different uniqueness in these scenarios, getting you to similar impacts. So when they try and destroy one of them, like, you just pick the same ones.
Yeah, I think those both kind of are on the same track as the main one I was thinking of, which is the first thing about knowing which argument to pick is knowing your arguments. Sounds very simple, but the number of times you'll see it where the LO is reading a shell that the MO hasn't really heard before, or they know, oh, we're reading this disad. We know we're reading the China disad, but the MO hasn't heard or seen what the China disad is. Stop it. Don't do that. That should not ever be a thing, because in order to give an effective MO, you need to understand what your arguments are and what their strategic function and utility is. So if an argument gets dropped, the number of times a round-winning argument is dropped by the MG and the MO doesn't recognize that and continues on as if nothing happened, and this round-winning argument is just sitting there, I would have never thought it was possible until I started judging around, and it became very clear, like, oh, they should be totally going for this. Why aren't they going for this argument? Why aren't they going for this argument? And then that happens all the time. And the reason it is because there's disconnect during prep time. I don't know, whenever it is, where the LO is the person who says, well, I'm going to be reading it, I need to know this. True, but the MO needs to know it just as much. The MO needs to know what that argument is so they can, when they're hearing the responses, they've thought about it like, okay, well, probably got 2 or 3 different link scenarios here. Whichever one they don't use or they don't answer the best, that's the one we can emphasize then in the block. If they've got pretty good answers about why, on our uniqueness arguments about why consumer confidence doesn't matter, they don't have a very good answer on manufacturing about why that's good for the economy, and by that being up means the economy is good. So you can say that, okay, they've got good answers there, don't have good answers here. Because I'm pretty knowledgeable about this, about my argument, I'm then able to pick and choose, okay, the manufacturing is what I go to. The ability to do, I think there are a couple ways in which you can try it and give yourself the skill of creating this, what's the best argument to go for. The first is a very simple question, is what's the path of least resistance? That's not always the route you should take, but you should always be at least thinking to yourself, have they left me any easy, even if I didn't really think this disad was very true, have they undercovered something just so much that I can easily just win on it? I think, again, you'll see an awful lot of times people go into a round thinking, yeah, well, we're going to run these 2 disads and we're probably going to kick this one and the relations disad and go for politics. And then you get into a round and the answers to politics are fantastic and the answers to the relations disad are terrible, but the MO went into the round thinking we're going to be going for politics and leaves an easy win available, or just doesn't take what's being given to them. Yeah.
So one of my personal strategies is like, first, I'll always put on top like what we maybe want to kick out of, get that out of the way. And then I look at my flow at, whatever are like our arguments, whatever they have put the least amount of ink on, like, if you have to just like go over it one more second, like get that on top. Be like, look, they have no answers on this flow this across. And then I try to spend most of my time where I have the most ink on their arguments.
Yeah, I think
really turning those.
I think that it's absolutely not a definitive rule, but it's absolutely a question that is very likely to, if you're asking what have they answered the least on, sometimes they might only have 2 answers on it, but they're 2 really good answers, and they're like, oh yeah, that was kind of a problem with our disad there, that was only 2 answers, but that one of them was really a good answer. So even though they've got only 2 arguments, they're the right 2, and you shouldn't go for it. But I would say that far, far, far more often, you get to your disad, they've got 2 answers on it, and you're saying, hey, whew, they got 2 answers on this disad, we're going to win. And so it should absolutely be, you should ask yourself, what's the path of least resistance? Should I take that? Oftentimes the answer is going to be yes. Did you?
Yeah, I have a question. So how can you strategically set up your LOR without making speech worthless?
I think the way in which to do that is to, I see the logical distinction, and some might disagree with me, but this is what I think makes sense as MOs, why we're winning, LORs, kind of why we're not losing, if that makes sense. Like, the LOR is, in my mind, more of a preemption of the of the PMR, that the PMR is going to get up and say, the way I try to imagine the LOR is, imagine the speech was after the PMR. Imagine you had 4 minutes after the PMR you want to make the LOR sound as much like it would as if it were after the PMR. So you want to be trying to predict what it is they're going to be going for and shutting those doors. Like, look, they're going to be sitting on this argument and trying to leverage offense, that their economy advantage is going to be more important than the environment. Because you've done that, you're able to, it's identifying their outs, their options that they could be winning, and saying they're never going to be able to win these because my partner in the MO just made this awesome comparison that as long as we're winning this claim right here, it's impossible for them to win any offense on this. So my partner's done the winning it in the MO, and the LOR is then drawing the connection of here's why it's impossible for them to win anything on that because we've established this point in the debate, which we're definitely winning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have like a, TKO strat, you kick the tier, whatever, like you're going to win the K and the MO, so you just mainly focus on that and you do less analysis on how that applies with the plan and leave that for your LOR and talk about how that K destroys it.
No, I think it would be the LOR would be okay, what the LOR would be saying is they've got an impact turn, they've got a perm, and they've got the AF that they say outweighs. And some framework args that say we're cheaters for running RK. Those are their 4 outs. You spent your entire MO talking about why you're winning the capitalism's bad and that the alt solves capitalism, doing all of that winning. The LOR then is, here's why the perm doesn't function. Here's why and those arguments should still be made they need to be made in the MO, but it's a way of framing it differently and a way of taking away their outs and their options. It is kind of, I think a lot of times people treat the MO more technically and less comparatively, and they do it because this is to try and create basically a delineation between the two speeches, the MO will be doing the comparative stuff or something, and the LOR will be doing the comparative stuff, and the MO will be doing the more line-by-line, nitty-gritty. I think this is the comparison stuff is how you answer. What? If you've read your disad shell and they have read their link turns, there's not a logical way of arguing other than let's just do all this comparative analysis right here about why our link is better than their link turns. Like going through, and I think a lot of people will say this argument not true because of X, this argument not true because of X, and they're treating it like it's an MG when to me it's not. It's their argument on the link story is investor confidence, ours is consumer confidence. Here are all the reasons why we would say that consumer confidence is a more prominent indicator than investor confidence. And it's that comparison, and I think people sometimes attempt to leave that to the LOR, but in so doing it's like, well, why would you be doing anything other than why would you be setting stuff out for yourself that isn't in comparison to the other team's arguments? You have to win that you're better than them. And so I think that does have a potential to make the LOR slightly more, not slightly less useful and slightly less having a distinct purpose if you're doing so much of the comparison in the MO. But the comparison is the important part, and so that is a downside of it. But you should still just be comparing. The fact that you have an LOR where you can also compare doesn't mean that you shouldn't just be comparing throughout the MO. That's the more important aspect of it. And the LOR then, the way to make it distinct in my eyes is to frame it differently, we've already won all of these concerns because this wasn't this. The only way they could do this is these options, and we're knocking them down one by one, explaining how they don't. That's only one way to do an LOR. There are more options available to you. That is, in my eyes, the most strategic one. So I want to talk for a little bit about, we talked for a little bit earlier about this knowing your arguments. That's the key to being able to effectively decide which arguments to go for. it's also a way to, I think a lot of this comparison isn't stuff you should be doing on the fly. It's that you should have already thought about these types of comparisons prior to it. So let's say that you've got a couple disads that you run a lot. You have an econ disad that you feel pretty strongly about that you run in many different situations. You have a politics disad about some bill that's going to pass that you say plan causes not to. You've got all of these different things. You'll probably, and depending on how varied your strategies are, you might have anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 pretty common go-to disadvantages that you'll run more than others, right? That's a pretty fair thing to say. Just that's kind of how it ends up turning out, that you've got those things that are your standbys, your old reliables, will just be going straight, and we do those more than others. So, if that's the case, then you know that this econ disadvantage that you like to run a lot, what are your warrants for why the uniqueness is the way you say it is in the school? Maybe it's consumer confidence, maybe it's housing starts, maybe it's manufacturing, maybe it's, there are all sorts of different kinds, but whatever whatever the warrants are that you're using, you should be thinking, okay, let's come up with a reason why consumer confidence is an important indicator. Let's see why that's important. And let's think of what are the common responses to this, and think, if you know that you're running so your disadvantage is going to be that the economy is high now, plan kills the economy, hurting the economy is bad, right? So in order to win this, you need to win that the economy good now, or at least doing well-ish. Let's say that for the tournament in that week, the Dow dropped like 1,000 points. Big stock crash. You don't want to just say, well, we're not running economy disads because we're not going to be winning the uniqueness. Stock market went down 1,000 points this week, never going to happen. You don't want to give that up. But you know that's going to be the response by the MG is, how can you say the economy is good in the status quo? The stock market dropped 1,000 points this week. Well, you'd be saying, if that's what you know their argument's going to be, you could think to yourself, try to have done that ahead of time, essentially, and say, that's going to be their argument, so my prep during the course of the week is thinking of the comparative analysis between what our warrants are generally that we tend to go for and stock market. Why our warrants are a better indicator than the volatility of the stock market. And so you might be saying, look, we have manufacturing warrants and we have housing warrants. Both of these are long-term, stable indicators that show a positive trend and movement for economic growth. Yes, this happened. Yes, the stock market dropped 1,000 points, but it's an extremely volatile market that the individual day-to-day movements of it don't matter that much. What really matters is the long term, where everything has been steadily going up. A better indicator of what's going to be long term in the stock market even is not what happened 2 days ago, but it is things like housing starts, and it is things like manufacturing, because those are better indicators of the economy. So not only are our indicators better, but hell, our indicators are probably better indicators of your indicator than your indicator, and if that makes sense. That if you're using the stock market, what's going to be happening in the stock market in the future is controlled by housing, by manufacturing. That's what matters. So you've done a lot of this comparative analysis for your main go-to arguments prior to the debate. It's lit. I know, and this is something that I didn't really think about until after I had been done with debating and actually doing it, I was like, man, there's so many times I wish I would have been better. It's like, when I think of all the briefs we would write, and we would have our lists of like, here are econ uniqueness warrants of reasons why the economy is good in the status quo. Shut up. Reasons why the economy is good in the status quo. And we would always write that, and we'd have reasons why the economy is bad in the status quo. I think it would have made an infinite difference in my debating ability if I had said, okay, well, here are these uniqueness arguments that we've been going for. Let's spend 30 minutes thinking of comparative analysis, why they're important. And even on the freaking bus ride to the tournament, it's taking out a piece of paper that has that and saying, well, and just doing that thought process in your head. And as you're doing that, you're then very able to recall pretty instantaneously, yep, I've thought about this. I know that they were probably going to say consumer confidence was really important right now, and so here are my 2 reasons why manufacturing's a better indicator. And you've already done that comparative analysis prior to the round. And by doing this and prepping it out prior to the round, I think it breeds the ability to do so on the fly. That if you're used to looking at a problem and doing that comparative analysis, then you're used to seeing it and making that comparison, and so it allows you to, when presented with something new, which, oh shit, I haven't done a thing in comparing that to that, but you've gone through the practice of having done it on other issues very often, it makes it so that you're more likely to be able to do this new comparison quickly and efficiently. This might seem tangential, but I like talking about the brain a lot. I read about the brain, and I think it's actually a wonderful example of of this type of what I was just talking about in action. So things like in neuropsychiatry, the way they use to describe the brain is it's like a hillside covered with newly fallen snow. And so if one person goes down the hillside, they're going to trudge through the snow. It's going to be really hard, but they're just going to go down and take a path. Another person might take another path. There might be a few different paths. If you send 1 million people down this hillside, very quickly there are going to start to be a few paths that become it creates, well, now the snow's been tramped down, I can just walk down this path. It's easy. The pathway's already been created. I don't have to make any type of trail for it. The pathway's already been created. So that is how our brains tend to think in certain ways, that the pathway has been created throughout our years of living and experiencing things, and when we're presented with a situation, we are more likely to go down the paths that we've gone before. Something like behavioral therapy, like Pavlov's dog, where you ring a bell, and every time the bell rang, he would get fed, and so they could induce like a dog's mouths would start watering and they'd want to get hungry just by hearing a bell, because there was that connection that had been drawn. That is what this is. That is creating a pathway in the brain of an expectation of this sound results in this is what's going to happen, and your brain goes along that path. So it shows how this occurs, but this is literally the basis of things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the bigger mental health therapies that's used. It gives you a problem, an issue, concern that sometimes you feel you might have been deciding the wrong way, and it literally has you bring up that concern and answer it in a specific way, that no, this is the way I should be thinking about it, and it has you practice it and do it over and over again. And the reason it does is it's literally asking you create this pathway in your brain. Your brain has those pathways down the hillside that it's used to going, that it's normally goes, and is easy and logical and makes sense to you. And the purpose of cognitive behavioral therapy is to, over and over again, go walk down this one part of the hillside, essentially, and create a new path just by doing it over and over again until that's the way your brain starts to address that type of issue. Because of that, I think that the practice that you have in debate, in doing that's how debate, everybody who I've ever talked to says there's at some point that debate clicks. That you start to get it, and instead of having to think about everything, it becomes a little bit more habit, a little bit more, it's when you just go to it because your brain knows how you want to answer a certain thing. Your brain knows that, okay, we're doing this comparison of whatever their uniqueness warrant is, whatever mine is, even though theirs came out of the blue, your brain naturally thinks in this, what are the type of things I'm looking for, what are the type of arguments that I want to focus on, what are the common types of comparisons I make that, even though this is a new one, how can I draw analogies between other comparisons, which I've definitely done all sorts of times in the past, and how do I use the information I've learned there effectively here. That is what happens when it clicks. So you don't want to wait for that. You don't want to just wait for that to occur. So the trick then is how do you speed that up that process? How do you make that click happen more effectively and sooner? And it's doing things like practicing on your 4 disads that you run a lot. It's doing all of that comparative work to the arguments you consistently get, doing all of that prior to it, thinking that out. That is kind of the training for your brain, I feel like, to get it used to making that decision. And then even if you're running a new disad that you haven't had time to prep out before the tournament and you don't know what and so it's just getting shelled out in prep time, or you get off the wall responses that you weren't expecting, 100%. So even though you haven't done any of the specific comparisons, you've done the training necessary to get your brain thinking in that regard. And once you've done that, that's the easy part. That's in debate, you want to be spending as much time thinking strategically and how is what I'm saying, how does it help me win? Very often when you're just starting out, it's what do I say is your main question. What the fuck am I going to say right now? That becomes then your body and your brain knows what it's going to say, or knows what its options are. You aren't confused and thinking. You say, okay, I've got a couple options here. Instead of just the what, it's, okay, I've got those. Now, which ones out of these are the best ones? So it's doing all of the baseline work prior to it that means you can spend the entirety of the time thinking about the specific decision making that needs to be made, strategic choice that needs to be made on this issue, not just what the hell am I going to say, how do I say this is bad, but okay, I could kind of say this, I could focus on that one more, I could do this, I could emphasize a certain point here, and then you're thinking about what's the best one, not just what is my answer, but what is the best possible answer that I could be using in this scenario. So let's just use some examples of this. We're playing. Oh, come over here. So, class, give me a resolution. One that we've had this weekend.
One that we have had?
Yeah.
Yes. And drone strikes.
There you go.
No, I don't want to. Econ's easier, I think, isn't something economy based. I feel like that's probably the easiest way to.
CO2 emissions.
And the embargo on Cuba.
Okay, so the resolution was that we're just going to do something, spending a bunch of, the USFG will implement a carbon tax, is the resolution. The F plan is the resolution. Their advantage is global warming. That's important. The next strat for you all is probably going to be economy, right? In that instance is that lots of businesses are going to get freaked out, not going to like this. So our disad is the econ. We want to be saying that econ good in the squall, right? That the economy is good right now. What are potential warrants for why that's true?
Good in the squad.
Yeah.
Investor companies is up.
Unemployment's down.
1, investor confidence up. Unemployment down.
Stock market record highs.
Cool. That's enough for now. We might want to go more in detail later if we're actually doing a debate, but for now, that'll be enough. So stock market's high, investor confidence is up, unemployment's down. Now, if you were the MG, what are some potential responses to this on the uniqueness level? What are your non-uniques? Brendan.
I think one of the more recent ones is that consumer confidence fell extremely low. It was like the biggest, it was at the 6-year high and it fell from 85.1, the index, to 80%.
So in the yellow, you're saying econ's good in the squall. Non-uniques against that are that consumer confidence fell.
Yeah.
What's another one?
Interest rates will go up, which will hurt investor confidence.
Good. So interest rates will raise in the future.
Unemployment's not really down, it's just the number of people that have unemployment benefits, like they just run out, so.
Jobs numbers, not as good as they seem. It's just people becoming the long-term unemployed. All right, so let's say this is what the uniqueness level of the debate looks like as we are, as you are the MO. So, they have consumer confidence. They have kind of, this argument is an attack on this one, saying why this isn't a very good indicator, right? If they're saying that the job numbers aren't as good as they seem, it's people just becoming long-term unemployed, no longer receiving unemployment benefits, it doesn't mean that they actually have jobs or something, they're just not receiving unemployment. So that might be a reason that this indicator you've got might not be as good as you would hope. They've also got this one that says interest rates will rise, hurts investor confidence in the future. So you've got these two warrants that could probably be tied to investor confidence pretty logically. You've got whatever the hell. Did you have a specific warrant about why investor confidence was up?
Make it up.
Okay, investor confidence is up. I mean, the point is that we're not making is not to do the specifics, but to figure out how we're going to compare. So, stock market high is probably an indicator of investor confidence, right? Because if people are investing in stocks, probably confident in their success. More people are investing in stocks means that there's the stock investor confidence.
Yeah, or you could say something like a lot of people are getting more credit loans and stuff for housing.
Okay. Yeah.
Could you also say that the idea that investor confidence is up currently and this interest rates will rise means that right now the interest rates aren't going to scare them off, and also the fact that the plan will increase?
Yeah. So we've got, let's say, we don't feel very good about this unemployment warrant because we feel that they've attacked it pretty well and they're non-uniques. But we feel better about our investor confidence warrants. Investor confidence we feel pretty strongly about that we can win. They've got two potential ways that they can beat our investor confidence warrants then. If that's what our story is going to be, we are taking out unemployment, and so this argument and this argument don't matter anymore. It means that the two ways that they beat us on the uniqueness on our investor confidence story is consumer confidence falling and saying that that's more important, or that rising interest rates will hurt investor confidence in the future. Right? Those are their two options. Let's think of ways in which we can say that investor confidence is more important than consumer confidence. Klaus. Investor confidence more important than consumer confidence.
Investor confidence determines how much money is going into businesses who hire, which means that even if consumption is low, if there's investor confidence, there'll be more hiring, which would cause a positive feedback loop, which would actually cause consumer confidence to go higher if there was hiring.
So investor confidence key to jobs and hiring.
So it's like a precursor to consumer confidence.
Mm-hmm. So in some ways you can say that maybe consumer confidence is a lagging indicator, that it might be low right now, but the reason it's low is probably because investor confidence was low like 2 years ago. The fact that investor confidence is high now means that there's going to be more hiring, there's going to be more people with jobs, there's going to be a better overall role in the future. So investor confidence is going to be a more important indicator than consumer confidence, because what really matters is whether people have jobs, and that's much more controlled by investor confidence than by consumer confidence. So we feel pretty good about that. We've done some comparative analysis about why investor confidence is going to outweigh that. We can also do more, but in the interest of brevity, we don't have much time. We'll just do that one for now. There are certainly more depth you could go into if you wanted. So now we have, in our eyes, taken away this, let's say, that we feel like we beat that this consumer confidence warrant that they're going for isn't going to be an issue in the round, that we're winning and feel good about our investor confidence more important. So that just leaves this last argument then. Interest rates will rise and hurt investor confidence in the future. What are some ways to beat this argument back? Give me one.
I think that, okay, so the explanation that I was reading, the warrant that I read for why interest rates are rising, has to do with the fact that housing values are going up, or at least that's part of it. So I would think that part of the interpretation of that claim would be making some comparative analysis about the trends in the housing market, and then maybe in the short term, values are going up, but as people continue to invest, that trend will change over time.
Good, high degree of difficulty. Very simple. There's a blatantly obvious, staring you in the face argument.
If interest rates are going up, there will be more investors, and we already said it was a precursor to consumer confidence.
Okay? still even more obvious.
They're investing even though the interest rates are,
They know that interest rates are going up. Everybody knows that interest rates are going up. People have talked about that interest rates are going up, right? People know that's going to happen. We're not sure exactly when it's going to be, but people know that interest rates are going up. Yet they are still investing. Yet they are still doing whatever other else our warrant is that shows that investor confidence is high. So you've then said, look, even if that argument is speculative, but if we in this debate round know that interest rates will be going up, I guarantee you that the investors in Wall Street firms and the people who are buying the stocks and the bonds and whatever, they're more informed about this shit than we are. They know that too. And despite that knowledge that interest rates will be going up in the future, they are still feeling comfortable about long-term investments like manufacturing and housing that we've talked about, which indicate that that investor confidence is high.
But high interest rates is good for investors because you're getting somebody else's money, especially to banks and stuff, and you're getting back a higher return. So more people are going to invest if it's more.
It's good for the bank. The investors want free money available to them to fund projects. High interest rates are good for banks, but the people who are actually funding the projects, people aren't investing all of their own money. They are investing a portion of their money and taking out a loan on other parts from the bank in order to allow them to fund a project like X, to allow them to build a new store in some country, in some city. That's an investment that's being done, but they're not doing it out of cash out of their own pocket. The lower interest rate means that they'll have a better ability to do that. So that's I think the argument about why investor confidence will be lower in the future with high interest rates, because we aren't able to do that. So now we stopped going for unemployment, made our arguments about why it's not a good indicator. So those went off the way. We then can just be thinking, okay, we need to win two things. We need to win investor confidence, more important than consumer confidence, and we need to win that we're better for investor confidence. I think that if the only warrant they have about why investor confidence isn't good is that it will be hurt in the future because of rising interest rates, I think the answer that we've provided is a very strong refutation of that they know that interest rates will be rising. That's still not enough to prevent the long-term investment that's happening in the status quo. So at that point, we've done the two things we need to do, right? We've made our consumer confidence warrant the most important, or our investor confidence warrant more important than the consumer confidence warrant. We've explained why our story about why investor confidence is high in the status quo is better than their story about why it's not. We've just won the uniqueness level of this debate. And the reason is because we know exactly what their warrants are. The MG, they've already given it to us. They've told us exactly what they can possibly be saying, right? They can't make new arguments in the PMR. Now the MG also generally knows what arguments you're making. That's true. But they're the most time crunched. They don't have the ability to draw many distinctions. They don't have an ability to draw a lot of nuance. It's much more difficult to tailor your arguments specifically to the shell in the MG than it is in the MO. Because you're able to do that in the MO and spend more time and really get into detail in it, because you're able to kick other arguments that you don't need to go for, that allows you to do that. Were you gonna? I think you were kind of raising your hand. Does that make sense into how this would happen? How much time do we got? Oh, shit. Yeah. I wanted to do like 1-2, but we don't have time. So the point remains, you can take anything out of it. The two skills necessary to be a good MO is issue selection and comparative analysis. Those are the two things you need to be good at. Practicing, figuring out drills and exercises that allow you to make these decisions and do these specific things over and over and over again to develop practice, create that pathway in your brain that is used to thinking about things in that way.